Once your fermentation of the wort into beer has completed, then it's time to take it out the fermenters and, well, bottle the beer. But there's a couple of things we want to do first. So one of those is to disconnect all these temperature sensors, which are controlling some heating pads to keep the beer warm. This is a Weiss beer, and we've been targeting around 25 degrees Celsius because we're trying to get some banana aromas going in this Weiss beer. Apparently that's the right temperature range for this yeast to make it do that. And yeah, so let's unplug it, and then we're going to try and cool down these fermenters by putting them in a deep freeze, a chest freezer. And by doing that, the yeast will become dormant. So let's get this show on the road. Just turn it off. There we go. That's just a bit of insulation for the temperature sensor, so that we're measuring the contents and the temperature of the vessel and its contents rather than the air. And there we go. Now we need to put one of these into the freezer because you can't fit both of them at the same time, and then you can alternate them until we get them down to a really cold temperature. Just made a bit of space in the freezer. Won't close with the little valve on it, the airlock. It's full of sanitizer. Okay. Stop too much air getting in. There we go, repacked it, close it up. It's a good few hours, like 5, 6, maybe more overnight to cool that down. So now we wait. So when you want to bottle beer, you also need bottles, and not just bottles, but clean bottles, and not just clean bottles, but sanitized bottles. You need to get rid of the potential for a bit of, mold or something like that, bacteria, in other words, to be in the bottles, and then you put nice liquid in there, and yeah, you get them going. A little bit of sugar in there and a bit of moisture, a bit of warmth, and they'll be very happy. So you want to make sure you get rid of them. So you use something like a sanitizer. This is iodophor. It's a no rinse sanitizer. That means you can spray something with it or dunk something in it. You don't have to rinse the sanitizer off. It's basically food safe. So this is actually a bottle sanitizer, but it does not last. So this was made a few weeks ago or a month ago. Doesn't mean it's going to be any good. So this just gets tipped out. And then we mix them up. So I like to put a bit of water in there, in the container, in other words. In this case, the squeeze bottle, or the not so squeeze bottle, the spray bottle. Oops, not enough air. There we go. Okay, nice and slow. It depends on the concentration of this, what the dosage will be. So, reading is useful. Okay, let's just stop that. Yes, it does make, or can make plastic yellow, this iodophor. So something to be aware of. I just rinse it down into the bottle, which is another reason why I like putting a funnel on there. Okay, there we go. Let's make this one empty from last time. So, try it out there. There we go. Sometimes it seems to help to unscrew that collar or whatever you want to call it first to get it going, and then you can spray nicely. Okay, we don't need this, put the cap back on. So one thing I can highly recommend is a bottle washer. I didn't have one at first, and well, it was a lot more work to rinse and sanitize bottles I was just dunking them in a bucket of sanitizer. It's supposed to save some sanitizer. What you can do is just take some of your spray bottle, yeah, these are just drying racks for the bottles. I try and get them from all sides. But it's not critical, because when you're spraying these bottles with sanitizer, well, not spraying them, causing a spray inside them, this is much easier. Get the bottle in there. And that's overkill. Just need 2 or 3 pumps. I'm just letting it get a bit of sanitizer in it for the first few. Then after that, you can take it a bit easier. I find it helps if you can get a whole bunch of bottles lined up. If you're going to bend over and pick up one bottle at a time, it slows you down a lot. One of the super useful tools is a hydrometer to measure the gravity, which is basically how much sugar is dissolved in the water. The more sugar in the water, well, the heavier that water becomes, the more dense, I should say. I find having a bucket to put things like this in is useful. And that's for a shaker siphon. It just plugs into the end of the hose, and then, well, we'll see that later. But if you're going to use it, you're going to have to sanitize it. So I like to fill it up, spread on the outside as well. Inside, outside, done. Then you've got hoses, silicone hoses I recommend. For one thing, you can boil them in your hot liquor tank, as an example. And then that's one good way to sanitize them. Well, clean and sanitize. Don't have a hot liquor tank going today, so let's just use the sanitizer. And I see now I've got it in the bottom there, but what I'm actually doing is letting it run from side to side. And other end, backwards and forwards a few times, and you just put it into the bucket. It doesn't make a mess. It also makes it much easier to spray the outside. Well, the ends, when you're spraying the outside, are the most important part. You also have a bottling wand. This one, you push into the bottle, it's got a spring at the bottom. If you don't push the spring, then you can also fill it up. And this is for the bottling wand, another hose. Okay. Keep some of the dust particles and other things that might be floating around out of there. No point sanitizing and then allowing those in. That's the tap for the bottling bucket. And then if you're going to have bottle caps, which we're going to need to cap the bottles, then guess what? They also need to have a bit of a wash. I like to just soak them in some sanitizer. And the bottling bucket also needs sanitizer. Just put it closed. Swirling it around here, trying to coat the inside of the bottling bucket or barrel. Remember, it's rinse-free sanitizer. That doesn't mean you want to drink the stuff. So we just tip out the excess after having swirled it around in our bottling bucket. Barrel. Just leave it there to drain for a little bit. Okay, so we're going to bottle about 25 liters of beer. Well, that's what we're going to stick in the bottling bucket at least. We're probably going to be a bit spare, and then we can do another calculation for that. Anyway, so using a priming calculation, because I don't have CO2, I add some corn sugar or dextrose, also known as bottling sugar. I need 243 grams. So I'll just get some of that going. 20. 45. It's a Weiss beer, so it needs a lot more carbon dioxide than other beers. I'm going for 3.3 volumes. Okay, 110. I've boiled some water already, and it's basically cooled down for the most part. It's my kettle, so I can do it with what I want. Okay, so that was 110. 116, so that's 215. Yeah, about happy with that. Dissolves pretty nicely. And then if you want to clean out your mug, cup, put water in there. Voila. That's what beer looks like before it goes in the bottle. And no, that's not infected for anybody who is not up to speed on that. So I'm just going to stick the hydrometer in, give it a bit of a spin. Yep, definitely good to bottle. Wow, that's come down quite a bit. Turn, come on, turn. Okay, so it's 2 below there. That's 1, 2, and 3. So it looks like it's got down to about 1.04, which is pretty impressive. The low. Okay, so we've assembled our shaker siphon, and that's how we're going to get the liquid from bucket down to the bottling bucket. So it's just the fermentation bucket, this one. That's all there is to it. I'm trying not to disturb the yeast because the yeast will be sitting at the bottom, a nice thick cake, because I stuck it in the deep freeze for, well, a good number of hours to cold crash it. You can see here I'm just keeping it below the surface. I'm trying not to suck up anything on the surface or from the bottom, literally just to keep the beer a little bit clearer, although this is a Weiss beer, so you don't have to have it super clear. But since I made a bit too much beer for the bottling bucket, there's no point in trying to get every last drop out of here. What you do want to do is try and keep the end in the liquid, aka your beer. Getting this shaker siphon going the first time is pretty easy. As you have less liquid to shake it in, less depth, then it gets harder and harder. So look at it go. Look at it go. It's not exactly a slow process to siphon. The other thing is this is a nice silicone hose, which I do recommend over the vinyl ones. Much easier to clean, doesn't seem to kink nearly so easily. I'm just tilting the bucket over a bit here, just to get a bit of depth here. So I don't want to soak up every little bit of nonsense. And I think that's good enough. You can see the yeast cake here at the bottom. That's what happens when you put it in the freezer, right? That's the whole point of doing that. Now you can see the bottling bucket's probably a little over halfway, so I'm just going to put my priming sugar in now, mixed in with the water that it is. And now we just repeat with the other fermentation vessel. You have to shake it quite violently until the liquid reaches below where you're taking it up, and then the siphon effect can take over. So what I do need to do is keep an eye on the bucket down here, the bottling bucket, because it is filling up rapidly. Not that rapidly. But I definitely don't want it to overflow. That will make one heck of a mess. Sucked up a little bit of air. As long as you're quick, you can keep the siphoning effect going by shoving the siphon, the suction end of the hose back in under the liquid surface. Okay, getting very close now. Have to pull the hose out there to make some space. Making a mess. To get our bottling hose and wand on, we need to put the tap on. You get to do a bit of weightlifting. And then what I recommend is giving this a bit of a shake to try and make sure that you've got the sugar dissolved equally, not sitting around here or at the bottom or top. I like to just turn it on the side a bit. You can do it on its back. Its front, it's going to end up in this position when you bottle. Then, once you've got this over here, to the bottling position, you get some bottles. So all these bottles here must be put below, upright. So you do that. And voila, you've got some bottles ready to be filled up. This is where the bottling one comes in handy. We connect this end to our tap. it's nice and tight. And then down we go. And I have to admit, using swing top bottles is quite a bit easier. So earlier you saw me measure the gravity, and it was 1.04. That's the, I suppose, the final gravity here. But the original gravity before fermentation was 1.042, which is a bit low. I basically had too much water in there. I had to step away from the mash tun draining process and the last bit of liquid that you get off the grain. So it was a case of I thinned out the beer a bit too much. There's only so much you can do. But still, I worked out the alcohol percentage, and it's going to be 4.7% and change, but whatever. That'll actually go up a little bit more because I'm putting priming sugar. Well, you saw me put the priming sugar into the bottling bucket. And the remaining yeast in here will actually wake up as the temperature rises and start consuming that sugar, and they'll turn into two things. One is carbon dioxide, which is how we carbonate up the bottles, and the other is it will create a bit more alcohol, so a bit more ethanol. In so doing, that alcohol percentage will go up a little bit from 4.7, but not massively. Interesting stuff, right? One thing about Weiss beer is once we've put the bottle caps on, we still need to let it carb up. Well, it's not just Weiss beer, any beer. You need to give the yeast some time. And that time is generally about 2 weeks, and that's at room temperature. So, 20 degrees Celsius or thereabouts to get those yeast to get going. This is an ale, so an ale yeast. Like most beers are probably ales. In fact, not probably. Most beer styles are ales, and that's based on the yeast. But the fun, interesting bit about Weiss beer is you can drink it when it's still young. So I could drink this after, well, just say a week in the bottle, or even less. It would just be rather flat, but the beer should taste alright. So, then with other beers, you definitely want to leave it for a couple of weeks to bottle condition. In fact, I've had a couple of beers, maybe even more than just a couple, where it didn't taste so great after 2 weeks. I thought, oh, that's not very good beer. But then magically, after about 3 weeks, they suddenly started tasting good. And then by 4 weeks, they were tasting excellent. So sometimes you just need a bit more time in the bottle. And it allows the beer to, I don't know if you want to call it mature, but smooth off. I suppose that's what they call it, bottle conditioning, right? It improves, is the long story short. So if you make a beer and it doesn't taste great after 2 weeks, just give it another week and taste it again. If that one tastes better, well, or how you like it, then you start drinking the rest of them. Put them in the fridge and you can drink them. If it still doesn't taste so good, give it another week. Hopefully there's been some improvement. Otherwise you might be on a hiding to nothing. Now, let me carry on here. So one tip is always move the carpets out the way, because when you get beer on the carpets, well, much tougher to get off than, say, tiles. So now I'm just going to weigh this container because it's pretty much empty. And it's basically 1,072 grams. So we'll just tar that. Bam, 0. Now I'll fill it up and work out how much liquid we add. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to end up with like, I don't know, probably about a quarter, maybe less, maybe more. I don't have a complete tank, so I need to know how much liquid's in here so I can calculate how much sugar to add. Actually, let's leave that around under there because I don't want it to go off and lose the tar setting. much harder to start this off using a shaker siphon when you don't have much up and down motion available because there's not much liquid or a container. Okay, so another 4 point. Not even. More than that. 5.2 liters. Nice. Nice. We can definitely do something with that. Waste not, what not. So what we've got here. This is the hand capper. It's actually quite an old one. Made in Italy though. And basically the camming action allows you to put quite a bit of force on the cap. These are the caps, they're called crown caps. If you look closely at them, you can kind of see why. Look a bit like a crown. And that gets crimped over the bottle. And then this is my test bottle that I get to drink. You don't want to drink too much while you're doing this because you'll start to knock these things over and get careless. So it doesn't taste too bad, so that's a good sign. Bear in mind these have been soaking in sanitizers, so that's not a bad thing at all to combat any weird and wonderful little goodies that might have been on them from the air. And the ones that fall on the floor, we'll just leave them on the floor. Yes, I know it's mostly off camera, but the point is, that's not right at all. So you've got to adjust this little sucker. You see some bottles have quite a large, I don't know what you call it. Well, this is where the capper will grip under. So depending on the height. So that's why I was adjusting the screw here. Okay. What I like to do is try and get them in a row. Then you can do one, and you can get the next one, and so on. The reason I don't like putting them right next to each other is sometimes you slip, and then you could knock another bottle over, and then you lose more than one bottle. Of course, the trick is to not slip at all, and then you do much better. Get a little bit, put them a little bit closer. You can go the other way. You'll notice I push it down quite quickly. It's because there's a magnet in here. And that magnet pulls up the cap if you're not careful. So it's not very difficult to get the hang of though. So I've actually selected all the bottles that I'm using today, even though they're different kinds of bottles. They've got it's the same distance between, the cap and where it can clip on, more or less. I mean, slightly different designs, but a millimeter or two doesn't make much difference. But some bottles are much deeper and some are much shallower when it comes to that distance. And so we go. Now, so that one I just discard. Grab another one. So that's the one we discard, and we grab another one out of there. Shake the excess sanitizer off, and we continue. So don't stress about it, right? Just keep going. When you get them all in a line, they're all the same height, you don't have to adjust the bottle capper. Then you can go pretty quickly. remember, smooth is fast. So don't start trying to rush and then knock bottles over. Then it's a bad time. And the last 4. 3. 2. 1. Okay, so I like to do very minimal labeling because time, really, more than anything else. So I just dry off the bottle caps. You'll see why in a moment, because that's basically where I stick. But all the labeling that I do just goes in the bottle cap, which is not very much. So, cheap, easy, and fast, right? I'm just putting a dot because this is from the second batch, which I think is probably a little bit whatever, cloudier and so on. And the rest of them will just get a W, or Weiss beer, or Wit beer, depending on what you want to call it. The only thing is my friends will now look at this and then they'll start asking me, what does .M stand for? Or, you know, M. I don't know. Some people are crazy. Okay, so the final tally is 44 half-litre beers and 19 440 mils. So, yeah, a fair bit of beer. Time to pack it away and keep it a bit warm so that, as I said, the yeast can, well, wake up, eat the priming sugar that we stuck into the bottles, which will prime the bottles, i.e. cause them to carbonate. Some people say that. And yeah, the yeast will eat that bit of sugar that's been stuck in there and turn it into carbon dioxide and a bit more alcohol. And yeah, the bottle conditioning process normally allows the beer to taste a bit better over time. It kind of like smooths it off. Over time, I mean like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. Depends on the beer. If you make something high alcohol, then more weeks. You know, you can start making something like an imperial stout, and it's 8% or 10%. Then yeah, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. You know, that'll be more what you're looking at. Anyway, the one thing about this being Weiss beer is you can actually drink it a bit green, so it doesn't really need as long, but it might not have finished carbonating up. If you don't want to add priming sugar and carbonate it up, then you need to get something like CO2 and force carbonate it. I don't have a CO2 set up, so I can't force carbonate, and therefore I just need to be patient. But I mean, bottle conditioning seems to work for me, and we'll see. Maybe I'll spend some more money on buying more kit to make beer stuff. You know, could end up with a conical fermenter that might make life a bit easier. Could do better temperature control with some glycol chilling and some warming, and yeah, then things will be getting very serious at that point. And maybe get into kegging. It's another option. Nice thing about bottles, you can give this to somebody present or take it to a braai, and that's a barbecue for you people in the rest of the world who don't really seem to know what those braais are. And yeah, then people enjoy some homemade beer. And yeah, tend to rate this stuff as good or better than the craft beer you can buy in the shop. So it's not about trying to be cheap. My time is actually worth a lot. So this is probably some of the most expensive beer I will ever drink, if I count my time. But the quality is like really good. I've just been having a few sips of this one. You see, I haven't drunk too much of it. I didn't want to knock over any bottles. But now that I'm done, except for the cleaning up, which I'll do a bit later, listen to some music and chill out a bit. Time for supper as well. I'll have some supper, drink this. But so far, yeah, it's actually improving just while it's been sitting in the bottle. Yeah, a little bit thin, but I think it could work. Well, it's pretty hot here in this part of the world at the moment, so I think this will go down well. To see what other people think of it. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. Cheers.